Christina, what's going on?
Hey, Josh. All good. How are you today?
Very well, very well. Like we were just saying before, I sleep really badly, so I'm trying to get as much coffee in as I can while we do this.
I know that
I'll show you my mug.
I've actually slept badly for 2 nights
Yeah.
in a row. For some reason, I don't know why.
I don't know if you can see that, but it says barely awake, and there's a bear.
Barely awake. That's cute.
There's a bear
Yeah,
on
that's
it
very cute.
who is barely awake, and that's me. And it's the biggest coffee cup I have in my house, in my apartment. It's huge. It fits way too much caffeine in it, and I generally overdo it with the caffeine, so I'll get a little like sweaty and
You start bouncing. I won't worry then if you start bouncing around in the
yeah.
chair.
If you see me starting to sweat and stuff, so we'll just ignore that. All right, we found each other on Matchmaker, just like many of the other podcasts, I believe, and you got a bit of a story in terms of traveling. I don't want to tell it. I think you'll tell it a lot better than I can. So, like I said, let's head from the
All right. Well, I'll go back. Before the beginning, because it's part of my story. But my parents were adventurers. My father was a mining engineer from New Zealand, and my mother from Britain, from Plymouth.
Yep.
And they met in Africa, in what was then called Northern Rhodesia, and is now Zambia. And it was in a copper mining town named Mufulira, 12 miles from the Congo border. And anyway, they met there, and I was almost born there, except at the last minute, Dad said, we're going off to New Zealand. I want my firstborn, born near my family. So we headed off to the South Island of New Zealand. I was born in Oamaru.
Nice.
And just 3 weeks later, I was off to Fiji.
Bit of a getting around already. Before it even starts, you already.
I was traveling continents.
You've already done more traveling than most. That's wild. How long did you stay in Fiji for?
Not long. I think it was like a year or even less. I think it was a remote gold. There was a gold mine on the main island there, which is still there actually.
Yeah.
And then we went off to Sweden, and Dad got a job with a Swedish multinational company. And then to England, and then to Lagos, Nigeria, for a couple of years, and then back to New Zealand to Wellington, and that's where I started school and where my sort of memory kicks in.
Yeah.
And then after about 4 or 5 years there, we moved to Sydney. So then I was in Sydney for 6 years.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. How'd you find it, like traveling and trying to juggle like the schooling? I moved a little bit when I was younger, obviously not as much, but it's one of those things you can't really get your roots down in schooling, so you're always making new friends, and I think that's probably why this really appeals to me. This whole podcasting where you can just sort of chat to randoms, because my life has been chatting to randoms since the start. So did you find that as well? Like you, even though it's probably a bit difficult to start off with, you sort of use it to better your life. Now you can chat to anybody, you can make friends with everybody. And what were the difficulties like going through schooling?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it really was difficult because I was always the new kid.
Yeah.
And so I had to make new friends. I was always the new kid, so I was always wearing the wrong clothes or saying the wrong word or pronouncing the name of the Taramara in Sydney. I said Turamura because my mother was from England and said Turamura. So I said that, and then everybody laughed, So all these sort of things. And, you just, so you're constantly trying to fit in, and you're constantly trying to belong. Because as a kid, that's your main thing, is fitting in. You want to be like everybody else. And so that's, was the main thing. Sort of the drawback to being a kid moving around so much.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I can relate on like just a slighter level. Yours is obviously way larger in terms of it's across country, across continents, like you were saying. It's different. Everything's completely different. Languages, styles of everything, culture. So, do you use it to your advantage now? Can you say that you've been like, I can adapt? Does it make you malleable?
Yeah, well, that's one thing growing up like that. It does make you very flexible and adaptable, and it also, as you alluded to, it makes you a great asset at cocktail parties because you can really find anything. I can talk to anyone. I can find some sort of commonality, some sort of common point with just about everyone.
Yeah,
and I've something I can sort of seize on and turn into a conversation or what have you. But probably the biggest thing is it really makes you resilient, and because you had to do things. I mean, I didn't want to go to school. And after 6 years in Sydney, then we moved to New Jersey in the United States. And that was the worst move of all because I was 13. It was a horrible move, age, anywhere. And then I had to make this huge shift. And, I was completely, out of element at that point. And, but I had to go to school. So, you just had to do it. And I didn't want to. I wanted to go back to Sydney. And, but, there was no way around it. You just have to, plunge in. So that's what I had to do. I had to learn how to be an American teenager. And so that's what I basically had to, that's what I did. I became an American teenager. But then it sort of turns into an opposite thing when you go back. And then we went back to Australia and New Zealand to visit. And I no longer fit in there either. I didn't quite fit in the States, and then I didn't quite fit in where I come from either. So you end up in this weird limbo.
Yeah, I think is super difficult. Once again, it's especially when you're that age. I think boys might have it a little bit easier because boys, we don't give a shit. You know what I mean? We could we just do what we do, especially at that age. We care about a few things, playing sports or comic books,
right,
or whatever.
Right.
Whereas like girls are starting to develop like social structures at that age. Deeply rooted friendship groups. They're acknowledging things on an emotional level much differently. So being caught in limbo would that'd be horrible. I guess there's no other way to put it. How long were you in America before? Did you do all of your high school in the States?
Yeah. Then I went to high school at a public high school in New Jersey, and then I went to university in Boston. I went to Boston University, and then I got into journalism, and I was a newspaper reporter at various newspapers in New Jersey. And then the travel bug, and this is the other thing that sort of when you grow up traveling, you're very restless.
Yeah.
And I was very restless, and you get bored easily. So I was like really bored, and I thought, you know what, I just want to travel, and I wanted to be a foreign correspondent because I thought that would be the best sort of marriage of both my interest in writing and in travel. Yeah. So I sort of had to go abroad and made that happen. I ended up going to Spain for a year, and then to Guatemala, and then to Venezuela. So I lived in Spanish-speaking countries for about 10 years.
Yeah, right. That's how fast do you pick up the language? Obviously, you're sort of rooted in it, so you'd have to pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I knew Spanish. Actually, I was pretty fluent before I went, awesome. And that was another thing too. I think also came out of being moving around the world is that because your ear is really attuned to other people and how they're saying things, because you don't want to say the thing wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Have everyone laugh at you. You can pick up stuff. So you pick up and sort of absorb things in very quickly. So anyway, so language wasn't a big deal to me, but I did have some Spanish from high school, and then just sort of learned it, took an interest in it. I read a Spanish newspaper, and there's a big Spanish-speaking population in New Jersey and the U.S. generally. So so I was able to sort of pick it up and get better at it before I went. But of course, then living there, you're immersing yourself in it, and you get fluent.
It'd definitely be a lot harder. I'm trying to learn Spanish now, but I'm using like the Duolingo app, and
okay.
I think it's a fantastic app. There's no way I would have taken it up. I think learning a language now is a lot easier than say 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
But it's funny. I have a couple of friends that speak it like pretty well, and I'm like, I'm learning Spanish, and then they'll just like hit me with a full sentence, and I'm like, nope, I didn't. I did not get any of that, but I'm learning. So thank you for that. Thank you for throwing me into it. So traveling as a reporter, What were you mostly reporting on? What was it? Just general stuff, or was there something specific?
Yeah, pretty much anything. I mean, a lot of it was news, news events happening. I would pick feature stories that I was interested in. A lot of human rights sort of things, especially in Guatemala. There was a lot of human rights violations coming out of the 1980s, civil war there. So things like that. I went on a forensic dig with a forensic anthropologist digging up a grave of a huge, mass grave of a village that was massacred and things like that. So a lot of that sort of stuff. And then I'd pick, some fun stuff, how Venezuelans love beauty contests. So I wrote a story about, they've won like all these beauty contests, Miss Universe, and there's a whole industry behind it. So that was a fun story. So I'd pick up, whatever was interesting and I could sell. I was a freelance reporter. And so I would, whatever I could sell my story to.
So would you say it's it's an industry over there? Do they actively aim to become like a Miss Universe type thing, or is it?
Yes.
Is that what you say?
Yes, they have plastic surgery. I don't know if it's still right now. It's the country's in toilet.
It's in a bit of a
thing. They had a whole industry, and they had this one guy who had sort of figured out the formula of winning Miss Universe, and he, so these young women would go and he would pick out the ones, and then he would say, well, you need a different nose, you need, bigger boobs, or you need, something, and they would have all this plastic surgery, and then he would put them in this school, sort of training them to enter these beauty pageants around the world. So
there you go.
I suppose quite a scene.
You learn something new every day. I'm taking that with me. Next time I'm down at the pub and people are like, tell me a fun fact. Venezuela.
Yeah.
They love the beauty pageants.
Beauty queens.
And
it's the most watched TV program, of the year in Venezuela is the Miss Universe.
Yeah, it's like their FIFA World Cup.
Right.
I like that. That's fun. Not now. They're not having such a good time now. So
no, it's
sorry, Venezuela. But so where'd you go after that? What was your?
I was there for as I say, a total of 10 years of doing that, and then I went to Miami, went back to the United States, and I worked at the Miami Herald as a reporter for 5 years. And then I came out to LA, and that's where I am now. And I worked as a reporter for another 5-6 years, and now I do freelance writing and my own fiction writing, write novels, which and that's how I wanted to come to LA always, and it does remind me a lot of my childhood in Sydney. It's sort of the same climate, same vegetation. Like there's a big wisteria vine out I look out this window, and that was just like I had the house across the road in Sydney. So those kind of things brought back memories a bit, because that's the other thing you have when you move around like that as a kid. You don't really have a home to go back to, and it's almost as if it didn't really exist.
Yeah, that's right.
It's sort of this odd.
You got a place that you sleep. That's what I. That's
yeah. So that was something to come back to LA. So this is my base now. I've lived here for 13 years. So that's the longest I've lived anywhere. So I've sort of made it my base.
So with all your freelancing stuff now, what are your interests? Like, what do you actively chase while you're doing your freelance work?
I do mostly editing and sort of corporate work, just because it's not as exciting, of course, as journalism, but it pays a lot more. So then it frees me up to do more of my fiction writing and novels and things. So I end up doing a lot of speeches for executives, talking points, press releases, editing manuscripts, all kinds of sort of corporate sort of documents, reports. I edit psychology reports and thesis papers, things like that.
Nice, that's fun. Let's talk about your books, Girl on the Brink and Skin of Tattoos. Let's unpack all of these. Let's unpack your books. Let's talk about them. What was your first one, and what inspired you to write it? Or what was that one, rather?
Yeah, this was The Skin of Tattoos, and
Yep.
this one grew out of a magazine assignment I have in El Salvador, and I had went to El Salvador to report on the growth of the gangs there. And this was actually quite a few years ago, when now it's completely overrun by gangs
Yep.
in Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador. But it was just getting a foothold in then. And the story was about the gangs actually came from Los Angeles, and they were Salvadoran kids who they were born in El Salvador, and their parents had left because of the civil war going on there in the 80s.
Yeah.
And come to LA, and they'd formed gangs because there was a lot of Mexican gangs, and there was so they formed their own gangs for protection. Then they got, committed crimes and things, and then they got deported and went back to El Salvador. And these were young men who in some cases barely spoke Spanish. I mean, they had left as very young children or babies, and so they really had no connection to El Salvador, and they had no job skills to speak of, so they ended up forming the gangs there, their same gangs, and that's actually what led to the whole gang problem in Central America right now. So anyway, that was my story in San Salvador. And then the story sort of stayed with me. And then in LA, I did a lot of reporting on street gangs as well. This is sort of the capital of the gang. And so I wanted to tell sort of the story behind the tattoos. The tattoos make them, they're all tatted up, and they look, very fierce and mean and whatnot. And so this got at what was under that. And so it's a story of a Salvadoran immigrant family, and the main character is a gang member. And he's trying to get out of the gang, and he can't really get out because once you get in, it's difficult to leave. Just because you have a criminal record, you have no job skills, and emotionally you're sort of attached to the gang.
They don't let you leave.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't want you to leave because you know a lot about their stuff.
So did you, were you interviewing these people from these gangs?
Yes.
Could you tell us about it? Could you tell us some stories, like in terms of like who and the whys and the wheres, and what was their particular story? Did you find that some of these people that you did interview, when you went in there, they had a bit of a facade on of like the tough guy, but once you sort of got to know them, they loosened up a little bit? And because realistically, I think a lot of people forget that the people, like, they live in the boundaries of what humans do. They just do something on the fringe of it, the extreme fringe. So what were some of your stories? Like, let's hear some of the stories about some of the people you met.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's exactly right. So when she starts talking to these guys, they were just like, sort of regular teenagers or, young men. They were early 20s, I guess, early to mid 20s. And they just wanted a job, basically. And at one point, I went to the shanty town on the outskirts of San Salvador, and with a photographer who took me there. And so there was a gang, there was an older guy, and then a bunch of kids, maybe, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years old. And he was sort of the leader of this little group. So what they had done, there was a dirt road leading to the shanty town, and they'd put up a chain across the road. So anyone driving up to the road, wanting to go into the shanty town had to stop. And then they would leap out and, bang on the window and say, pay a toll. It was basically... Yeah. That was how they made money, was, collecting, not much. Money. I mean, I don't know, a couple, whatever, pesos or what have you. And so that was their, sort of life. And a lot of these young kids were, addicted to glue, and they would sniff this glue and it would stunt their growth. So I'd say, how old are you? And I thought that they looked like 10 and they were like 16,
Yeah, right.
It was just horrible. And, so I got talking to the guy who was in charge of this thing, and at first he was all sort of, tough guy, and then he kind of softened up, and he leans over to me and he's like, Senora, would you know of any job, going, I really need a job, and I have a girlfriend, and my girlfriend has a 6-month-old baby, and it just hit me right then. It's like, well, he was a gang member and, the leader of this group, but all he wanted was a job and to support his family, just like anyone else everywhere else in the world, and it just sort of like, so maybe we are more similar than dissimilar. When you when you get beyond that superficial level, we all want the same things.
Yeah, that's right. And like I said, I've a lot of people do forget that. I think it's very easy to judge somebody on their actions. It's very easy to go, they're taking money off people, they're selling drugs, they're doing this, they're doing that. And once again, I think there's a variation of that. But if you're that young, like, who doesn't want a bit of money in their pocket? And if you're not given the opportunity, you're going to go find it, especially if you have responsibilities. And in a country like that where there's not a lot of opportunity, and then once you're in, it's like you said, it's very hard to get out. So it's this thing that's just, it folds over onto itself, and it's self-perpetuating, where it's, how do you get out? How do you go, all right, well, I'm doing this to make money. All right, I got to stop to go to school. And then what school is going to accept me? And then, you know what I mean? So it's super hard for them. And I think a lot of gang members cop a lot of flack. I think there's a lot of bad people out there in gangs, but I think there's a lot of good people who are just sort of caught up with the system a little bit, where they, they've got no choice. They've got to do it to survive and to get by, So you kind of feel for them a little bit. Except for the sniffing glue, that's maybe they're doing it just to.
Well, one of the reasons
to self-medicate.
I found that also. I did a report on street children in Guatemala, and that was actually, what they did. They would put the glue. It was called shoemaker's glue, and it was a German glue, Henkel's glue, and they would put it on the sleeve of their jumper. So then they could just sniff it like that all day, and it would stave off their hunger pangs. And that's why they liked it. I mean, it would kind of numb them out, they wouldn't get hungry. The kids living on the street. I mean, it was just, really heartbreaking. But yeah, as you say, I mean, it's just very difficult to get out of that gang. And sometimes, and kids get pressured into it. I know. And later on, I did the stories here in LA about gangs, and because they're always recruiting, and they want young kids because they really want, they're wannabes, they see the things that the older guys have, which is the money, the cars, the women, the drugs, what have you. And they really want to join the gang, or sometimes they even don't, but they get pressured into it because, otherwise they're going to get beaten up, going back and forth to school every day, things like that. So it's sort of a sad dynamic. It really is.
Yeah, it's definitely horrible. It's one of those things I've always explained, like gang life, exactly how you see it in movies. So you'll see the start of the movie, you'll see lots of money, like you said, the cars, you kind of have like power and access to things, and then there's that tipping point, like 2/3 of the way through the movie, and then it goes horrible, and you hear every single case, which is the same. I think there's that saying where it's like, if you're in a gang, you either end up in jail or dead, and that is incredibly accurate. And that's what a lot of people don't see, or they're so caught up in it that killing somebody is justified because there's a bit of a paycheck at the end of it to get to that bit of a glory. That is stereotypes from movies and music and all of this. But there is a very clear and definitive end to most of these cases, which is jail or death. There's not a lot of room.
They don't, and very early death. They don't live very long. I mean, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's the thing. Did you meet any like ex-gang members? I always find it very interesting talking to the older or ex-gang members, where they kind of reflect back on their life, maybe post-children. I remember watching an interview with, I forgot who was doing the interview, but he interviewed one of the cartel hitmen who killed hundreds of people.
I think I know you, the guy in Colombia.
I believe so, yeah.
John Cairo or something.
It was such a
I know who you mean.
Such a turnabout. I remember watching it. I think it relates to this, where it's like, he was a guy, and he has incredible remorse for what he did. He's, you know what I mean? And it was a weird conversation, because you think when you go into it, somebody who was working for the cartel and did all these things is going to be this hard, couldn't break kind of guy. And he was incredibly open. And he was like, I shouldn't have done it. Did you meet any people like that, where it was just like a huge sense of remorse for what they did? Or I guess it's a different situation where they kind of had to, because of the circumstances and the situation they were in, right?
Yeah, no, I have met them, and I did a lot of stories, and eventually also a book, a nonfiction book on gang intervention, what they call gang intervention. It's basically using former gang members to sort of intervene in the cycle of violence. Usually, gangs are driven by it's just a ridiculous circle of payback. Basically, it's retaliation.
Yeah.
Then the other side retaliates for the retaliation, and then it just goes. It's just this endless circle of retaliation. Um, and just escalating violence. And so I did a book on that, which grew out of another story I did for the Associated Press in LA about a guy who has a model for training interventionist, street intervention, what they call. So I did speak to a lot of those guys, and they have, tremendous, remorse for it, but also accept it. It's also like that's how I grew up. I mean, some of them were second, third generation in gangs. It was like a family tradition to join some gang, and they took sort of a pride in that too, in some cases. But they actively wanted to give back to said, I helped destroy this community. Now I've it's up to me to help build it back.
Yeah.
So they did take that very seriously and try and get kids out of it. And just make them see what they were doing. It was terribly destructive, to others and to themselves in their own lives. But it was a difficult line to walk, because you can't, if you judge them and criticize the gangs, the active gang, they'll just say that they're not going to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to kind of, so you had to kind of, they had to kind of not do that, but at the same time kind of nudge them and make them see the error of their ways before it got too late.
How did it impact you, talking to all these people?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about being a journalist is you get to talk to people in all walks of life, from the very top of society to the very bottom, and so this was just another one of those weird sort of sectors of society that normal middle class people don't really see, otherwise, other than movies and television. But it was just it really hit me how. Again, if I were walking in their shoes, born into their situation, would I have joined a gang? I may have, I mean, again, you can't really judge without walking a mile in their shoes, sort of as the saying goes. But so it's just, heartbreaking to see the difference in the haves and have-nots. That's really what it's about. There are no gangs in affluent neighborhoods.
There's no gangs in Hollywood. Oh, there probably is actually, to be fair, but yeah, you know what I mean. But yeah, that's exactly right. If you don't, nobody's going to do it if they don't have to.
Right.
If you have access to things, you're definitely not going to go down that path. Nobody wants to be a drug dealer or be a murderer or trying to con people out of money when they when that access is there. You don't have to, so you don't need to. What happened after? What happened after all of this? You wrote your book. Do you stay in touch with these people, or is it ongoing, or is it just you do your piece and you sort of
it's sort of always a criticism of journalists that we kind of parachute in, do the story, and then leave. And there's some truth to that. But your role isn't to get involved in the story. So I never really did. I did try and keep in touch with the guys in El Salvador, and then I had an email, and I remember emailing and never getting anything back, so I don't know what happened to them in the end. But I assume they're still there. And so I haven't really kept in touch with them. But it did inspire me to write this story and sort of portray them in a more 360-degree angle rather than just a narrow, newspaper story of who, what, when, where, how, and
that's right. Just the thing that sells, which is that glory side of it, the high ups and the low lows, the quick crash. I think that's what people want to see and read. They don't want to see anything behind it. In terms of the you were saying about the top echelon of society, who'd you talk to?
Well, I interviewed President Hugo Chavez in Venezuela twice, so that was probably the highest.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. He was remaking at that point Venezuela in sort of a socialist paradise, although he was very careful at the beginning not to use that word, but that's he did eventually. So that's what he was doing to, for social justice. He called it a peaceful revolution. So that was really fascinating. And he would talk very knowledgeable and throw in all these political references of Montesquieu and this and that. So that was really fascinating, actually, to witness his whole project being put into place in Venezuela. And now, of course, the critics said, he just wants to turn this to another Cuba, and it's sort of happened.
It's turned into another Cuba. So
that was cool. And I've interviewed a couple billionaires also in Venezuela, and one guy owned the TV station and the Pepsi, in those countries, you have these oligarchs these family-owned things. They kind of own like everything, they'll own like a ton of stuff. I mean, there's a few in every country, but in there, in countries in Latin America, they wield a lot of power, and so I interviewed a couple of those. So that was, again, a very different side of society,
That's right.
Very cultured, sophisticated, cosmopolitan people.
Do you get to spend some time with them, or is it just a straight up interview?
It's usually just a straight up interview.
Yeah.
I mean, those ones are very controlled. Usually there's a PR person, hovering.
A particular time spot.
You talk about this and not that. And, they're not going to say anything too controversial. But, it's always interesting to see how they, live and whatnot and things like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think it's, I've always found that very interesting as well. Once again, you always also forget that like billionaires are people too. They still feel things. They still, go through somewhat of, what everybody goes through. They just have lots of money, so.
Yeah, I know.
So,
which makes life a little less, urgent, I suppose, at times. But yeah, I mean,
you don't have to worry about your bills. Your life is doing a lot better than most, but it doesn't make you impervious to feeling, guilt or shame or jealousy or anger or happiness. So to be
a drug or alcohol problem, or
that's exactly right. That's why I asked. I was like, I'd be interested to see. It's like if they let you spend any amount of time with them. I guess it'd be one of those stories that nobody would ever see. So if you got to spend, say, a month with them and you could really go in depth, but that story would be buried so quickly. Like you said, the PR people would pull it up. Yeah, would pull it up straight away and they'd be like, that's not getting out there. That's weird how it's like they set you up for an interview and they're like, you can interview this person, but here's what you have to say and ask and do and act.
Yeah, you submit your questions in advance and that kind of thing. It was all very controlled.
Yeah, it's not really an interview then. It's just it's just you asking what they want you to talk about. The next book. What was the next one about?
This is Girl on the Brink, and this is a young adult novel, and this was something based on something that happened to me, which was a bad relationship, sort of an abusive relationship. It wasn't based, it was more inspired by, and I got myself out of it. It happened here in LA, and I did get myself out of it after a year and a half, and it was very difficult then both to sort of break it off emotionally, and also because he was stalking me, which is something that abusers do. Is they stalk you online, they stalk you at your house, so it took a lot to get away from him finally. But I felt, I guess I'm seeking sort of catharsis about the whole thing. I wrote this book because I also wanted to show teenage girls and boys, actually, as they start their dating lives, what these red flags are. When you know them, there are red flags that are very clearly signs of an abuser. But they can also be very easily mistaken if you don't know what they are. And so that's why I wrote this book. And Chloe is a teen reporter, and she gets involved with this guy and thinks, falls head over heels for him. And he's then, as time goes on, his dark side, the violent side starts emerging. And then she has to get away from him.
That's fair.
So,
Are you okay to unpack this? I like.
yeah,
Let's.
I mean, part of my thing is that, you have to talk about things. I mean, this happened to me, a long time. I couldn't talk about it for quite a while, and I felt so ashamed and humiliated that I'd gotten myself involved in this, and that's part of the reason why people don't talk about it, after surviving it. But
Yeah, it's. I think it's a good topic. The only reason why I want to sort of unpack it is I did an interview with Madeline Black, which actually had a bit of a tech issue, and it didn't go to wherever I stream it to. She's a rape survivor. She was gang raped when she was 13 by two boys, who essentially they beat her up pretty badly. They stabbed her. And one of them was going to kill her. And once again, it's a very severe case. And Madeline was very good about it because, I went through something similar when I was younger in terms of sexual abuse. And then, eventually, it turned into like a rape, and it sort of manifests into these things where it's where those red flags that you were talking about aren't so apparent, and they could be easily, put under something else and misled. And then there's that sense of, I think it's gaslighting people, where you can be easily gaslitten, I guess. So prior to this boyfriend that led to this book, what were your relationships like? And do you think this is something that sort of came from you traveling so much? Where you couldn't...
It might have, yeah. I mean, again, when, because I had traveled so much and because I was always focused on fitting in wherever I was, I don't think I focused enough on myself.
Yeah.
So when he came along and sort of what you call love bombed me, just was calling me, day and night. Oh, Christina, I can't stop thinking about you. I just have to hear your voice.
Oh, wow.
What do you do? I just want to know what you're doing. He'd get on a plane and fly across I met him in Miami, fly from LA to Miami. And, I just, had to spend the weekend. I ran out of this meeting. And I mean, this was incredibly romantic, flattering.
Yeah, definitely. That's the stuff you see in movies, right? That's the...
I thought, this is like, movies coming true. So it just took me off guard. And and again, I didn't know really what it was. I mean, now I see, after getting out and studying up on, reading up on dating abuse and all this intimate partner violence, that's exactly what they do. They come on really strong, come on pressure for a very quick involvement. It was like a couple of weeks later, he was already saying, I love you. And I'm like, well, you don't even know me. And I know, you're the one for me. I wish I'd met you earlier. Yeah. I can just feel we're blah, blah, blah. And look at all these things we have. And he would, go over all these little things we had in common. And, and it was just like, and again, I fell for it. I just fell for it. And I think I just had always focused on other people, at being a journalist and being, traveling, living in other places, growing up like that, that I just didn't see it. Although I felt, I knew that there was something wrong with him, but at the same time, it was so attractive. What he offered was just so seductive. I couldn't stay away. I couldn't just close the door on it.
I think a lot of people have been through that though. The exact situation that you just, it's nice. It's nice to feel, like you get home from somewhere and your phone has some messages, and they're nice messages. So you go, this is great. And you appreciate the fact that somebody's taken time out to see you. So especially when they make that big effort, like you said, flying from LA to Miami, you go, this is fantastic. This is really,
I know.
Really
I was
good.
like, nobody's ever done this before.
And then the I love you thing, even as weird as it is, being such a short period of time, like I said, you hear the stories from your grandparents and they're like, well, I knew her for 3 weeks and then I proposed, and you're like, oh, that's the dream.
Right.
So you automatically relate it to that and you go, this could be it. So, but once again, I think there's, on the other side, on his side, there's that's he knows he can get there and he's whittled it down. You know what I mean? The first girl, maybe it took him months to get to that stage where he's like, all right. And he's like, I can just whittle it down to weeks now. And just once again, that love, the bombardment of love where you go, it's all at once. And if you smother somebody in love, they can't see anything else. So then everything you do seems legitimate, and those red flags are always in the back of your head. Like that's a bit weird. But then there's more love immediately followed, so it's very hard to see. So how long were you knowing this guy? Did you guys live together? Was it
Yeah, then that's when he convinced me to move from Miami to LA, and I gave up my job and house and everything and moved to LA, and that's when it really sort of started to go downhill. And I knew fairly quickly I'd made a mistake, but it was too late, you know, and I felt so embarrassed, you know, and he was so erratic. His behavior was just completely erratic. And he was also addicted to OxyContin. And again, he had a prescription for it. And this was before this big fuss about the opioid epidemic and things. So I just thought, he's, you know, it's his knees, he needs this pain med. And so that was a whole other thing. And it just got sort of worse. And it was just really more emotional abuse. It really wasn't, you know, physical abuse, but it was this emotional manipulation and incredibly manipulative and done everything. The other thing they love to do is isolate you, which was why he wanted me in LA. And as you said, you know, so you can't see beyond him, you know, you can't see beyond them, and nobody can see in. So, you know, my friends, you don't want to hang out with them. They're just jealous of you. They're not up to your level. You don't, you know, I don't like her, you know, I don't like him, or, you know, I mean, it was always this sort of weird thing about, you know, you're not on their level, you're above them.
So
it was like a compliment, but at the same time, it was all very carefully calculated to win me over. You know, again, paying me this sort of compliment that they weren't on my level, but at the same time, there was this ulterior motive of isolating me.
Yeah, it's I think people like that really, like I said, they've got it fine-tuned. Whether they're consciously doing it, but subconsciously they have it down to a T. They've got this, and it's not even just in relationships. You see it in friendships. You see family members doing it to other family members. This, they sort of see like a beacon of light outside of their life, and they know their life sucks, and then they get this beacon and they won't let go of it. And they'll keep dragging you back down and back down and back down. And then, like you said, it's that thing of as soon as you start to step out, like they'll go, no, your friends suck. And you're like, oh, okay. And you kind of take it on board a little bit, which is, once again, it's they know they can get away with saying that, you know, your friends suck or your family's not good for you and you need to get away from them, or, you know, you just need me. I'm just the, you know, I'll be your sole provider of everything.
That was the thing. And of course, you know, it seems odd, but at the same time, you get to the point you don't know what to believe, and you just don't know what to think. And you know, because they're so on top of you, you know, and I had to be with him sort of almost 24/7, you know, I mean, it was just really odd. And, you know, and again, the control thing, it's all about power and control over you. So he would check, if I went to somewhere and he would check up on me. He would drive by and say, I'm going for the walk in the park. He would check up. And of course, if I didn't want to be yelled at or, you know, some other punishment, you know, I had to be there or whatever. So then I started, you know, you have to start scheming, you know, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to do that? And I found I was turning into someone that I wasn't, you know.
That's crazy.
That really wasn't me.
And I think this is another thing that I brought up with Madeline. It's a lot of, so like we said, guys and girls both do this. And I know there's like, especially here in Australia, there's recently been a lot of politicians, like football players, really mistreating women. And this is a type of it. And I think this is passed off as it's not that bad because it's not physical. But the emotional abuse is just as damaging. It takes years and years to get over. And another thing that I sort of discussed with Madeline at the time is exactly what you said. There's no fear with men in a sense. Like even all the stuff that I went through, I don't stop myself from doing stuff out of fear of being hurt, you know, being, sexually abused or raped or whatever. Whereas like women, that is a very clearly defined line, and men have stepped over it many times, many times. And this is how it starts though. It's this, if
Right.
I think there's like different aspects of control. You control people, mentally at first, you get them on board mentally where they go, I can relate to this person. We click on a different level. And then it's emotional. Once that mental control sort of hits its limit, then there's an emotional one where they start going, your friends suck, or your family's not good for you, or yada yada. You know what I mean? And then immediately after, there's that physical control. Like, I'm starting to lose you mentally. I'm starting to lose you emotionally. I'm going to physically control you now. I'm going to physically put you in your place. It's horrible. It is absolutely horrible for anybody to go through it. With you, how did you get out? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Where was that?
I just started. I felt I was going crazy, and it wasn't even a year after I moved to LA, and I just thought I was losing my mind, and I knew something was wrong with him.
Yeah.
I tried to get him. He promised to go to a therapist and promised to go. Of course, never went. I even tried to find him a therapist and all this sort of thing. And finally, I was the one who ended up, trying to call a therapist, and finally got. And she said, I used to work at a domestic violence shelter, but you're in an abusive relationship and you have to get out, and it's going to be probably the hardest thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
And of course, at that point, I didn't really realize I was in an abusive relationship.
Yeah. It's not the ones that you see on TV. Yeah.
I had to get, over that, acceptance of like, I got myself into like, an abusive relationship. He was an abuser, and this was domestic violence. Domestic violence?
Yeah.
I was a foreign correspondent, a journalist, and I'd done all these, adventures, and I still got myself into this thing. So that was a big, thing. And then I had to start this process of sort of weaning myself away from him and off. So it was very difficult. At the end, I had finally decided he had borderline personality disorder. I'd done all this research on the internet, and it just, fit him to a T.
Mm-hmm.
So I had left some stuff for him on the dining table, and gone to bed. And I woke up the next morning, and I see all these bits of paper all over the floor. And I'm like, what's that? And I pick it up, and he had ripped everything up. Or he ripped up my photos.
Oh, yeah, right.
All these photos of me. He had ripped me up. And then he had scrawled on this paper, you're just trying to brainwash me. And then the door flew open, and he flew in, and he said, you're trying to poison me. You've poisoned my pills. I'm going to report you to my friend at the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency.
They've always got a friend somewhere.
Okay. Right. I mean, in that instant, I just knew he was A, insane, and B, really dangerous.
A little bananas. Once again, a lot of people in that situation on the opposite side, and I think everybody's done this on different levels. Once again, it's not just that extreme. You always try and fill gaps with other people. If you're not very comfortable with yourself, you'll fill it. And you see people in bad friendships and people who abuse friends, and they're just trying to fill a gap. And that, obviously, this guy is the most extreme, where he had no level of sensibility, no level of emotional control, and he was like, "You fix it."
Right.
Christina, it's your problem now. You've moved here. Pick up my shit. And if you don't, my friend at the DEA is going to come get you.
So that I moved out in a hurry. It was a very dramatic, scene and everything. And then, got out of it finally. As I said, he stalked me and did all these things.
That's wild. And that is, once again, there is a very high level of danger attached to that. That's nuts. Just somebody following you is fine.
It's surprising how common it is. I mean, when I talk about this at book, events and things, I always get someone coming up to me afterward, sometimes in tears in their eyes, saying this happened to me. I was married to, an abusive husband for 14 years or 20 years, or it happened to my sister or my, it really is very common.
It's incredibly common. Very, very common. I think I don't want to say stalk. Well, once again, there's no level of danger, so attaching the word stalk to it. But I've had girls rock up in my house, and once again, it's out of that need. Like I'm fulfilling some sort of a gap for them, and it's like a drug, I guess. Like love, in a sense, in that sort of word is a bit of a drug, and they become very reliant on it. You know, I've had them rock up to like I've been out with my friends, and they've just shown up, or they've come to my house at like 2 a.m. and that's like a level of stalking. And it's once again, I've got no fear. Like I'm a pretty big fella. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can look after myself, but the amount of fear on the other end of that, like if it was me rocking up at somebody's house and just sitting out the front, that would be fucking terrifying. That would be so scary. Ugh. Yuck. Yeah. What are people doing? Just, and I think
it's this weird. Yeah, I mean, you become addicted to it is like an addiction. It absolutely is, and you kind of have to break it. That's why it's hard to sort of break. You have to kind of wean yourself off it. You
definitely do. Yeah. And I think that another thing where you like, there's always that joke about the wife or the girlfriend trying to get the boyfriend to go to see somebody, and the guy's always very stubborn about it. I think it's a very, very stigmatized thing where like boys have to be men, and you know what I mean. And I think we've all heard it. I've heard it from, uncles, my dad, partners, where they're like, man up, and it's a very toxic thing to do. But getting that help would have probably helped this dude realize that he is the problem and he needs to fix it. It's not a Band-Aid solution with your partners. How much of this translated into your book?
I had to amp up some of the incidents I put in there, and I had to amp up the drama a bit more. So as I said, I wasn't beaten or punched or anything like that. I did put a little bit of that in there. Yep. I did put the stalking in. A lot of the dialogue was sort of directly, again, the jealous. Your friends are jealous. That sort of thing. So quite a bit made it in, I guess. I don't know. So
it's good. I think it's like one of those books that's, because it's not directly related, but it's so close, and I think a lot of people are gonna relate to it very heavily. I think it's not, once again, it is incredibly common. I don't think there's a lot of awareness about it either. So a book like that is that sort of perfect interim, because I don't think you may have felt this as well. Is like when you were going through it, it's you don't want to admit it. So it's, and then if you read one of these direct to the points, this is my story, a lot of people will read that, relate, and then try and convince themselves that it's not true. So this interim that you've made is actually sort of perfect for that, where it's, on the cusp of being, fact and fiction. You know what I mean? It's a made up story with heavy facts in it. So people can read it as a regular book and then maybe relate it. And hopefully that's their foot through the door to go that there is a problem, there is a bit of an issue, and I need to look into it further rather than trying to deny it and just keep denying the fact that there's these huge red flags. Let's talk about something a little bit lighter. What's what are your next couple of moves? What are you planning on doing?
Well, I'm working on a mystery novel at the moment. It's got a true crime podcast in it. I've listened to a number of those, and a cold case and that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm on the second draft of that. I think I've been trying to hash it out for like a couple of years. I wrote different versions of it and stuff, but I think I finally got it. So I'm hoping to finish that this year. And I've been writing essays and things like that, submitting them to literary journals and reviews and anthologies. So the pandemic actually is actually been quite a productive time for me, I have to say.
Yeah. I think
a lot done.
Yeah, it's probably right down your alley, being locked away a little, not locked away, but just shut in. You can sort of get some work done without that outside noise a little bit. But it's good. I think it's it really adds to the creativity, I guess, especially with like a murder mystery kind of thing. Don't you think? It's like the state of the world at the moment. You can get a lot of information in, and you can sort of relate it back into your book. What is your process of writing? Like, where do you start? Where do you finish? Like, how did you come up with an idea to make a murder mystery book?
Just things that sort of like draw my attention, like the gang thing, I mean, it just sort of, for some reason, it drew my attention. I was listening to true crime podcasts and I thought, oh, that'd be really cool to like do something like that. So that's got incorporated into it. I've set it in New Jersey at this, where I lived in New Jersey, where I went to high school. There was a sort of a state park, and you went up this mountain and there was a lake in the top of the sort of the mountains, and a lot of kids would go up there and party. And I always was sort of fascinated. It was just like a setting that could be very sinister, because it was really remote. And they had, park rangers wouldn't really go up there that much. So kids would hang out and drink and smoke pot and, swim in the lake that they weren't supposed to swim in. So that setting has always stayed with me too. So that's the setting, that's a big deal in the book. So I have a lot of notebooks and things that occur to me, I write them down, and or names for characters, things like that, or different sort of, if I notice some sort of quirk it's odd, then, oh, that's a quirky thing, I'll write that down and, incorporate that into a character's down the road. So just things that, just draw my attention. I note them down and, go back through my notebook and see them.
That's awesome. I find it like incredible that people can just pull inspiration from things and then turn it into a book. I think I've always been sort of jealous. I used to be a musician, so I can kind of relate on this much of a level where it's like an idea comes in and then it sort of goes out in some form. But yours is just long form, over 200, 300, 400
like
pages.
Musicians hear tunes and things in their head, and then they write it down, composing and things like that. So this is just have plots and characters and things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when are you looking to release something like that, or how many times do you go over it and rewrite it and reread it? And
quite a few. I mean, you sort of each time, each draft you go through, it gets a little shorter because you've got less to do. So but it should take the rest of the year. I think I'm hoping I can finally just get it done this year. It's long enough. It's really been too long.
That's right. Well, let me know when it comes out. I'm gonna grab it. I'll buy it. I got a ton of books I need to buy because of this podcast. So I'm just gonna add it to the list. I'll grab your other two.
I'm gonna put you on my email newsletter list.
Please do. Let me know. I'll definitely grab it. Well, that's about an hour. I won't take up too much of your time today. Christina, thank you so much for coming on. It was wonderful to chat. You've definitely looked at. You've been all over. You've seen it all.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Is there anything you want to leave with before I disconnect?
No, I think that's good. We touched on all the main points.
I think we got it all.
That's good.
I think we got it all. All right, Christine. Well, I'll be in touch anyway. I'll get this uploaded and I'll send you the links. But definitely let me know when that book comes out.
All right, great.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
That's good. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Let's see if I can get this to work straight away. Give me my camera back. Put it on my face. All right, without the camera, screw it. We'll do it live. That was Christina. Bit of a life. You could speak to somebody like that for hours with the amount of stuff that she's done, which is crazy. Hang around for a little bit. I think at about 10:30, I'm going to go over the Madeline Black podcast that I did, but I didn't get up, which is a shame. With all of Christina's stuff, I'll link it all down below. Go check her out. Yeah, I'll definitely check it. I definitely got the links. Tomorrow I've got. Who do I have on tomorrow? I have. Oh my goodness, come on, done. I have Donald G. James. Old Donald is he's ex-NASA, so it would be a really good conversation. I'm going to hopefully get some rebuttals to the flat Earth guy that I had on, which will be nice. It'll be fun. Other than that, I'll be back on in about 30 minutes to go over this Madeline Black. But thank you for coming, guys. Enjoy your day.